Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprints. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock. Thank you very much for joining us again. Another great show lined up for you. So we ask that you like, comment, subscribe, share this program, help us push back against the ever-moving Liberal agenda. Maybe there will be someone in your social media network that might be open to hearing that conservative message, something they aren't getting in the mainstream media. This is your chance to help ensure that Erin O'Toole is the next Prime Minister of Canada. Of course, as always, you can't watch or listen to the whole thing right now. You can download it later on. Listen to us on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it. It is out there. Without further delay, we bring in our guest. It is James Cumming. He's the Member of Parliament for Edmonton Centre. He's also the Shadow Minister for Small Business and Economic Recovery. We welcome him to the show. A good friend. You've been on before. Thanks for coming on again.
Glad to be here again. Always good to be able to talk to you, Jamie, and thanks for putting on this show.
I almost drew a blank on your title, but I'm glad I got it.
Let's start it up a bit. It's COVID-19 economic recovery, but close enough.
Well, see, I gave you a promotion. Did I give you a promotion? Hope so. Well, congratulations. Yeah. Well, let's start with a couple of things. The economic recovery part and small business. So I want to touch on that, but also I want to touch on the budget. I know it was a few weeks ago. I love this quote from Don Martin of CTV. He said the budget was a super spreader of spending, and this whole envelope of extra spending, either borrowed or printed money, couched under the umbrella of COVID release. But they also put in all these other pet projects that they decided to throw money on, but yet actually forgot that the pandemic was about healthcare. So maybe you can talk a bit about the budget catastrophe.
Sure. So you'll often hear from the Liberals that it's the Build Back Better budget, and I refer to it as it's the Build Back Bigger budget, which, generations upon generations are going to have to pay back over time. Now, that said, would we support, because you've shut down businesses and you've created an environment where people can't work? So are there some levels of support? Sure, absolutely. But the real reality, though, is two things. On the healthcare side, there was nothing to deal with what the provinces really wanted, which was a budget items towards COVID recovery and a further increase in transfer of health payments. And you didn't see any of that in the budget. And probably my biggest issue, Jamie, is that a lack of clear direction on how this budget is going to help with a long-term economic recovery. There's a ton of money in there for infrastructure spending, but it's not infrastructure towards things that will create more revenue. So in this country, even before the budget, our growth was quite anemic. It was about 1%. And post-COVID, most of the spending programs aren't designated towards things that will improve Canada's competitiveness, improve our productivity. It's on a lot of boutique projects that the Liberals have come up with that don't have a revenue number attached to them. So how are we going to grow ourselves out of this if we just continue to spend without that opportunity for growth?
And when we talk about growth, the economy going forward, we have some important stuff we're waiting for on Enbridge Line 5 that will have pretty catastrophic results if it does get shut down in Ontario, Quebec, and also your province of Alberta.
Yeah, and the budget had virtually no mention of the natural resource sector. The sector that has fueled this economy and is critical not just to the sector itself, but I think of Ontario with Line 5 and with increasing energy prices and so dependent on manufacturing that we will lose our competitive edge against our peers internationally. And these are companies that want to grow and they want to expand. The reality is we can't just sell to ourselves. We have about 38 million people, which, it's helpful. But the reality is Canada's an exporting nation, and we have to make sure that we're set up for success. And I didn't see anything in the budget that did that.
Now, if we are talking about growing for success, a lot of the slowdowns in the economy is because government has its boot on the neck of the economy. So how do we release that boot? Not with more government spending. We need to actually get vaccines. And yet, as we see in many countries right around the world, the UK, Italy, for example, is talking about reopening, and many others, Israel, the UAE, and the list goes on, the United States, they are reopening because they did not, they being their government, did not make major mistakes in the procurement process that caused Canada to get behind so many other countries. We should be farther ahead than what we are right now.
Absolutely. You cannot have an economic recovery until you have a health recovery. And it frustrates me to no end to continue to hear this speaking point from the Liberals that we have more contracts for vaccines than anybody else. So effectively what they're telling the public is we wrote more purchase orders than anybody else for a variety of vaccines. What they neglect to tell you is that those purchase orders didn't have clear objectives on when we're going to receive these vaccines. So if you look at Israel, they didn't write massive POs to a bunch of different drug companies. They were really focused, and look at where they are today because they're able to get vaccines, and they now lead, I think they lead the world now in double vaccinated population. And it's because they were very strategic and they made sure that they put together a program that would work based upon outcomes, not based upon bragging points that I've got this massive portfolio. You know, the reality is, I just find it so ironic that when I was in the construction business, that we would, you know, you're issuing a PO does not guarantee that the job gets done. You actually have to write into the PO, when are you going to finish the job?
Now, I'm sure you're hearing a lot about this from small business owners, the hotel, the hospitality industry, restaurants, my goodness, all trying to figure it out. I think the survey I saw from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business was 84% of businesses took on more debt through this crisis. They need some certainty at the end of this on the small business side. I know we talked about the larger players kind of in natural resources, but even at the community level, the vaccine problems, and then of course we had at the beginning of the pandemic the rent program that only 10% of businesses took in because the Liberals wouldn't take advice from the opposition. We had the wage subsidy was started at 10%, eventually got to over 70, but those were problems that happened along the way that caused businesses to take on more debt. And then with lack of certainty because of not enough vaccines coming in, we have more problems, more delays in getting these businesses up and running.
Absolutely agree. You know, we have a huge Main Street problem right now for these small businesses. And although the programs have been helpful to a certain extent, a lot of them have been adding on debt and putting more leverage against these companies. So what I'm hearing from companies now is that they're concerned about their debt load. But the more important point, Jamie, is they need some level of certainty. And I recognize that with the variants, that it's really hard to determine that, but other countries have. Others have actually come up with constructive programs on how they're going to get their economy back and open. And they've been strategic by sector. They've done risk analysis. They've done a proper plan on being able to tell these small businesses, okay, here's how we think you will be able to open up. Now, granted, a lot of that is provincial responsibility, but the government can take a leadership role by saying, here's how we're going to procure more vaccines. Here's how we're going to get them to you quicker. And quite frankly, late to the gate on rapid testing. They've just now started to recognize as a bridge, the availability of testing could really help out with some of these industries.
Let's talk about quickly inflation for the moment. As we continue to borrow, as we continue to print more money, we're going to see some inflationary pressures because you can't do this forever. You can only do that for so long before you debauch the economy and the currency. Probably a combination of both. What are your main concerns when it comes to that?
Well, there's two things. One is that the central bank has been buying bonds like there's no tomorrow. The government's ratcheted up spending like we've never seen before. But the other piece of the puzzle is that the supply chains have been drastically affected by this pandemic. And so those supply chains now, I'm hearing from businesses that their materials that they're bringing in have increased in cost significantly, both via shipping, both by the source cost. And so building that into their products, they're all suggesting that they're going to have to increase their prices. So that's going to be a real push on inflation. So history tells us when you have a push on inflation, you start to see those numbers go up, interest rates have to go up. And when you're running a $1.4 trillion debt, principally at floating interest rates, because most of it hasn't been secured over term, it's very, very concerning. And even if they did start to block it out over term, they will not get the rate they're getting today over a longer term. So we're going to have a significant issue in this country of being able to service that debt. And that's all going to future generations. And to me, that's incredibly distressing. And I hope it has people's attention.
Well, I think it should, because if you look at the numbers and some have been projected going forward, the amount Canada is going to spend on paying interest on the debt is going to far outpace what we're spending on the universal childcare benefit and a lot of other programs. This is just basically going to be wasted money because, again, the Liberals have created this budget, the super spreader of spending, on a whole bunch of pet projects outside what should be the pandemic spending envelope, and then couched it all and put it on to future generations.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jamie, you bring up a valid point that not only was there the short-term spending, which quite frankly, we voted in favor of most of the bills that dealt with helping out small businesses, helping out individuals that are out of work. But in this budget, they've layered in a bunch of structural spending issues with no plan on growth, no way to describe on how are we actually going to pay for this into the future. And the budget's loaded with issues like that aren't dealing with the direct short-term issue. They've created this long-term spending commitment, and that's very concerning without this strategy around growth. And it just frustrates me that there is, you'll hear in the budget, we're going to have the new economy, the new jobs, the green jobs, but there's nothing descriptive about when are these jobs going to happen, what sectors are they going to be in, how high paying will they be. It's just fluff. And as conservatives, I think we like to see actual plans documented that actually show how are you going to get to that.
Well, here's a prediction. I'm going to give you a prediction right here, James. When this happens, the left is going to ask for more time, more patience, and more taxpayer dollars. And at some point, they will get it right. They're almost convinced of it.
Yeah, and and we really don't have the value of time, because as they drag this on, we had $100 billion worth of new debt prior to COVID. We've latched on to short-term and long-term spending that will likely take us up to, we're at 1.4 trillion, and they've asked for a debt ceiling of, I believe, 1.8 trillion. So that would tell me that's sort of where their target is. The numbers are staggering for the size of the economy. When you layer in the federal debt, then take provincial debt, then take municipal debt, and you add that all together, it's staggering.
Okay, let's talk about what the Conservatives would do. Conservatives have laid out a plan. Maybe you can talk a bit about that, what the difference will. I see someone turn the lights out on you. I think you've overstayed your welcome. But what would the Conservatives do? Obviously, if we were given the opportunity to govern in the next election, how would we fix this mess?
Well, without question, we would, geez.
You got to pay your hydro bill.
On again. Without question, we would work on economic recovery and start to look at where can we grow the economy, because this has to be about growth. There's going to be some rationalization with spending, but the reality is, with the level of debt that we've taken on under this government, we are absolutely going to need massive growth. So we'll come up with programs respecting those industries that have got us there already, see how we can gain market share and start to grow the economy again and grow opportunities. So there's the conventional industries. And then I think there'll be new emerging industries that we will be able to be very strategic in our thinking and focus on external growth. Because reality, Jamie, is that we need to grow, building our trade with other partners, because our economy is just not big enough on its own without that external growth.
And that's, I think we got to wind it up here, but I think you touched on it pretty well there, but just want to unpack a little more. I think that's where the conservative approach comes in. When you lower taxes, when you keep government rules, regulations, and red tape at a reasonable level, you have rapid innovation. You can incentivize a whole new group of people coming up with the next great product, the next great thing that people want to buy freely with their own money. And when you don't have the constraints of government, we've seen other instances across the globe where when the government gets out of the way, people, the individuals will come up with the products. The market will be there to provide what the consumers need.
Yeah, Jamie, I tell people I started in business when I was 21 years old. I had my first opportunity to buy into a construction company, which we built into a bigger company. And not once did I think about government helping me or assisting me. It was always about this opportunity. Like I just was so excited that I'd be able to contribute, build something, do something. We've lost our edge on that. We've lost the ability. People don't think that way. We have to get it back. And I'm convinced that under conservative policies, we'll get it back.
James, I always give,
and we'll make sure that the lights stay on in a room when you're doing a video.
well, that's odd. Usually in Venezuela, the lights never go off in the government quarter in Caracas, but for some reason in Ottawa, it is in your room. So look into that. But I always give our guests the last word. James, you did sum it up perfectly there, but I'll give you the final word here.
Yeah, I ran for politics, Jamie, for the main reason is I wanted to see public policy that would create this entrepreneurial spirit in this country again and make this country the place to set up and grow, raise a family, and do something and create wealth. And we've lost our swagger, and I do think we can get it back. I'm positive that we can get it back if we get a new government. I'm not so convinced if we see the current policies going on for any extended period of time.
Getting our swagger back. I love it. James Cumming, the Member of Parliament for Edmonton Centre, also the Shadow Minister for COVID-19 Economic Recovery. I got it right that time. Thank you so much for joining us. New content every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We do appreciate you joining us, but we also need your help. We need you to like, comment, subscribe, share this program. Help us push back against the ever-moving liberal agenda. And of course, if you can't listen or watch it all now on Facebook, download it, listen to it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, you name it, it is out there. We do appreciate your time, your help, and together we can ensure that Aaron O'Toole is the next Prime Minister of Canada. As always, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That is the blueprint. Thanks for joining us.